Hey there. Hello again. Welcome to the second part of the machine learning landscape. In this video, we will try to cover a high-level overview of unsupervised learning. In part 1, the machine learning landscape, we have mostly talked about supervised learning, where we predict an answer based on the provided label in the training dataset. But in unsupervised learning, computer learns from imitating patterns, just like a baby learns from his mother, like learning the world by observation. Contents we will cover in this presentation are: what is unsupervised learning, types of unsupervised learning, clustering algorithms, visualization and dimensionality reduction algorithms, and association rule learning algorithm. Now let's see, what is unsupervised learning? In unsupervised learning, machines can learn from finding patterns just like humans can learn. A dog is a different kind of animal than an elephant, or we can figure out the rule of a game just by looking at the play. Here the algorithm sifts through unlabeled input data and identify patterns that it will use to group similar data, that how many different objects are in the dataset based on their shapes, colors, or other properties. This is the most natural way of learning anything. Human brain is specially designed that way, to learn by observation. Types of unsupervised learning. In unsupervised learning, the training data is unlabeled. It means the system tries to learn without a teacher. The most important unsupervised learning algorithms we will discuss in this presentation are clustering algorithms, visualization and dimensionality reduction algorithms, and association rule learning algorithms. Let's talk about unsupervised clustering. The most basic way to model any given dataset is to assume that it consists of distinct groups of objects that share properties. Clustering is recognizing different properties in different data points and creating categories based on these properties. To program a computer for clustering, first, we need to choose some properties of data points. Suppose we have a dataset of different kinds of irises in our garden. So for this dataset, such properties can be the color or the shape of the data points. Since the color of all irises is the same, therefore we can choose the sizes as their distinct properties. Here each data point represents individual flower. There are different types of clustering algorithms. Some of the most popular clustering algorithm we will mention in this presentation are K-means clustering, that divides data points into K distinct groups. Hierarchical cluster analysis, HCA. It subdivides each group into smaller groups. Expectation maximization, EM algorithm. Using it, we can find the local maximum likelihood. K-mean clustering algorithm. K-means clustering is a method commonly used to automatically partitioning the dataset into K distinct groups. It proceeds by selecting K initial cluster centers, and then iteratively refining them, as follows. First, each data point is assigned to its closest cluster center. And then, each cluster center is updated to be the mean of its constituent data point until the clusters no longer change. The algorithm converges when there is no further change in the assignment of instances to clusters. In this work, we initialize the clusters using instances chosen at random from the dataset. The datasets we use are composed solely of either numeric features or symbolic features. For numeric features, we use a Euclidean distance metric in 2 dimensions, which is a Pythagorean theorem, and for symbolic features, we compute the Hamming distances. The real issue is how to choose K. For datasets where the optimal value of K is already known, we make use of it. For the real-world problem of finding lanes in GPS data, we use a wrapper search to locate the best value of K. One way to decide K is to try different values for K, starting with guessing K equals 1. We can decide the best value for K by quantifying the variations. So if we plot these variations, we will find an elbow plot. Hence, we can pick the K by finding the elbow in the graph. K-mean clustering versus hierarchical clustering. K-mean clustering specifies or groups data into the number of clusters we tell it to. On the other hand, hierarchical clustering specifies data points pairwise, in which two things are most similar. It means that the hierarchical clustering algorithm subdivides each group again into smaller groups. The results of hierarchical clustering are usually presented in a dendrogram. We have shown here the hierarchical clustering dendrogram for the iris dataset. Expectation maximization algorithm. Expectation maximization (EM) algorithm is an iterative method to find local maximum likelihood estimates of parameters in statistical models, where the model depends on unobserved latent variables. The M iteration alternates between performing an expectation E step, which creates a function for the expectation of the log likelihood evaluated using the current estimate for the parameters, and a maximization M step, which computes parameters maximizing the expected log likelihood found on the E step. These parameter estimates are then used to determine the distribution of the latent variables in the next E step. As we can see in the picture that M clustering of Old Faithful eruption data. The random initial model is fit to the observed data, which, due to the different scales of the axis, appears to be two very flat and wide spheres. In the first iterations, the model changes substantially, but then converges to the two modes of the geyser. Visualized using data mining software framework, Alki. Visualization and dimensionality reduction algorithms. Visualization algorithms are also good examples of unsupervised learning. We feed them a lot of complex and unlabeled data, and they output a 2D or 3D representation of the data that the machine then can plot easily. These algorithms try to preserve as much structure as they can, which means it separates clusters in the input space from overlapping in the visualization. Algorithms involve visualization and dimensionality reduction. Principal component analysis, PCA, which is a method of simplifying data without losing information. Kernel PCA, where principal component analysis can be employed in a nonlinear way through the kernel trick. The resulting technique is capable of constructing nonlinear mappings that maximize the variance in the data. Locally linear embedding, LLE, it is a nonlinear dimensionality reduction algorithm. T-distributed stochastic neighbor embedding, TSNE, it takes a high-dimensional dataset and visualizes it to lower-dimensional 2D or 3D graphs. The algorithms we will be looking in this section are the TSNE and the principal component analysis. Let's talk about TSNE. A popular visualization method for exploring high-dimensional data point is something called TSNE. With this method, the computer sees each set of high dimensions of number as a single data point. The visualization algorithm, such as TSNE, what it does is, it takes a high-dimensional dataset and reduces it to a lower-dimensional 2D or 3D graph. A data point such as people consists of different attributes, such as height, weight, origin, occupation, favorite food, color, etc. The number of attributes considered are several dimensions of the data point. The computer sees this dimension as numbers, and each set of numbers represents a data point. But, by looking across all of these dimensions at once, the computer can place related data points closer together in high-dimensional space. Using TSNE computer clusters these data points together that it considers related. Here we can see in the picture that TSNE clusters the different hand-row digits between 0 and 9 of a similar pattern together. Each type of digit is an individual image. The computer sees each digit consists of several pixels, and it treats each pixel as a dimension. Again, using the TSNE algorithm, computer clusters these images in high-dimensional space. As we can see in the image that TSNE groups similar kind of digits clustering together. Hence it learns something about the meaning of these digits. Now, let's see an overview of principal components analysis, PCA. As we are doing an overview, therefore, we will not talk about any math involved in PCA here. Principal component analysis, in which the goal is to simplify the data without losing too much information. One way to do this is to merge several correlated or covariance features into one. For example, the dimensionality of two-dimensional data can be reduced to a single dimension by projecting each data point onto the first principal component. The amount of variance retained by each principal component is measured by eigenvalues. Here, PCA assumes that the directions with the largest variances are the most important, or the most principal. The use cases of the principal component analysis are: identify the hidden pattern in a dataset, reduce the dimensionality of the data by removing the noise and redundancy in the data, identify correlated variable. So, using PCA, we can find out which data point or row variable is most valuable for clustering the data. PCA algorithms consists of several distinct steps. Step 1. Get the data and plot a graph for the data. This step also includes finding mean for all attributes or columns. Because using the mean, we can calculate the center of the dataset by subtracting the mean from each value in the column. Step 2. Transform the data center to the origin. Now randomly draw a best fit line that defines the minimum distance from each data point. And measure the distance of each data point from the origin, and square the distances and sum them all up. For the line, the sum of squared distances is the maximum, which is the principal component line. Step 3. Compute the covariance matrix, M, of the transformed dataset. Here covariance is the measure between two attributes that shows how those attributes vary from each other, which indicates if one goes positive then does the other one go positive, or if one goes positive, does the other go negative. Remember, the covariance and correlation are very similar things. The only difference is, correlation is bounded between -1 and 1, whereas covariance is not necessarily bounded that way. The covariance matrices are square matrices because they represent covariance within every other column in a dataset. Here we can see in this picture, a correlation matrix. It shows how column varies from every other column in the dataset. 0 indicates they both are most varied, and the negative value indicates both columns are negatively correlated, and the correlation 1 says both columns are approximately similar. Step 4. Calculate the eigenvectors and eigenvalues for the covariance matrix. MV equals VD. Here, V is the eigenvector of the singular vector, D is the eigenvalues. V is the projected vector from the data onto the principal component line. The vector is perpendicular to the data. Step 5. Calculate the principal component. PCA equals BV, where B is the mean subtracted data we found in step 2, and V is the eigenvector. The eigenvector V is also called loading. It tells us how much one data point is important over another. Talking about the applications of principal component analysis. Dimensionality reduction. Dimensionality reduction is the transformation of data from a high-dimensional space into a low-dimensional space, so that the low-dimensional representation retains some meaningful properties of the original data, ideally close to its intrinsic dimension. Data visualization. Plotting multidimensional data is a difficult task. The principal component analysis, or PCA plot, converts the correlations into a 2D graph. In the PCA plot, cells or attributes that are highly correlated are clustered together. Feature extraction. For example, a car's mileage may be very correlated with its age, so the dimensionality reduction algorithm will merge them into one feature that represents the car's wear and tear. This is called feature extraction. Here in this image, we have shown a 2D PCA by plot of 4-dimensional iris dataset. We can see for irises, based on 4 features, sepal length, sepal width, petal width, data points that are highly correlated are clustered together. Note that the PCA method is particularly useful when the variables within the dataset are highly correlated. Correlation indicates that there is redundancy in the data. Due to this redundancy, PCA can be used to reduce the original variables into a smaller number of new variables known as principal components, explaining most of the variance in the original variables. Finally, another common unsupervised task is association rule learning algorithm. The most common algorithms in association rule learning are a priori and eclat. What the a priori algorithm does is, it digs into large amounts of data and discovers interesting relations between attributes. For example, suppose we own a supermarket. Running an association rule such as a priori on the sales logs may reveal that people who purchase barbecue sauce and potato chips also tend to buy steak. Thus, it can help to place these items close to each other to boost the sale by promoting associate products, and also benefit consumers to choose their exact needs. Another important unsupervised task is anomaly detection, such as detecting unusual credit card transactions to prevent fraud, catching manufacturing defects, or automatically removing outliers from a dataset before feeding it to another learning algorithm. Here the system is trained with normal instances, and when it sees a new instance, it can tell whether it looks like a normal one, or whether it is likely an anomaly. There are other types of machine learning techniques as well, such as semi-supervised learning. This algorithm can deal with partially labeled training data. Usually, a lot of unlabeled data and a little bit of labeled data. Google Photos are good examples of semi-supervised learning. Once we upload a photo to the service, it automatically recognizes that a person shows up in the photo. Reinforcement learning, it is a very different kind of beast. This algorithm learns based on performed action. We also have batch learning and online learning, instance-based learning, and model-based learning. Well, we are at the end of this presentation. Thanks for having patience for watching this far. It almost took a while to build this content. So, if you find this presentation is helpful, please don't forget to like and share, and also consider subscribing to our channel. It will inspire me to create more contents like this on data science and machine learning.